Hi everybody, I'm Anna. I'm the Everypaw vet. We're going to start a series of live chats talking about things that are relatable to the month of the year, the time of the year, or just general questions that people want to find out about their pets. So I thought I'd tell you a bit about myself to start with. So I am a small animal vet, mostly see cats and dogs, but get the occasional exotic creature, you know, bearded dragons, snakes, hamsters, all that kind of thing. I love surgery, my favourite thing, so I'm always pleased to help you out with, you know, anything that goes wrong with your animals. I have two dogs, two little collie crosses. I also have a bearded dragon, so he's a really cool pet. Takes a lot of looking after, but he's really, really lovely. I also share a horse, so I really enjoy riding. And recently taken on a really old cat, bless, that came into my practice and was going to be put to sleep because the owner was going into a care home, but we now have her at our practice as our practice cat, so she's really happy. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. So today, things we're going to be talking about, the time of year at the moment, there's a lot of fireworks going around. I've had a lot of people coming into my practice recently asking me about what they can do for their pets around the fireworks season. I mean, some people are quite keen to just change things in their household, and some people are quite keen to get a bit of help out with supplements and drugs and things like that. So I thought I'd talk about that. And also, having just been the summer holidays, a lot of families have now got puppies and kittens. I've seen a lot in recently for vaccinations and flea and worming treatment, and the question I'm asked time and time again is, should I get my pet neutered? So I thought we'd talk a little bit about that as well. So starting first of all, we're going to be talking about bonfire night. So with regard to bonfire night, it's not just about your pets, first of all, so I thought I'd talk a little bit about wildlife. So when you make a bonfire in your garden or anything like that, whether it be in your garden, in a field, wherever, please make sure that there's no hedgehogs nesting in the bonfire that you make. So if you do it a couple of days before, make sure that before you light the bonfire, you have a quick check around in the undergrowth to make sure that nobody's there, you know, little creatures or anything like that, okay? Sorry, just a second. The thing isn't coming up for questions. I just wondered where I go on it for questions. Sorry, a little bit of a technical thing. Here we go. Oh, brilliant. Okay, so we've had our first question in from Faye. How can I stop my dog from barking on bonfire night? So, excellent question, Faye. So, dogs' natural reaction to loud noises to bark, as I'm sure you all know. Knock on the front door, bangs outside, anything like that. They want to know what's going on, and they want to get involved. So how can we stop them from barking on bonfire night? Oh, I'm back. Good. So sorry, going back to Faye's question, sorry. It's our first live chat, so we're going to have a couple of little technical difficulties, so everyone will be patient, that would be amazing. So yeah, back to Faye's question about barking on bonfire night. So really, with behaviour in dogs, there's a mainstay of three things. There's a combination of working on behavioural techniques with your dog, so training essentially, and then there's environmental changes that you can make, so to your home and things like that, and then there's supplements that we can get to sort of, I don't know, and for want of a better word, supplement the other things that we talked about. So if we go for behavioural first of all, a really important thing when your dog is barking on bonfire night is not to pay them attention while they're barking. Dogs are very much creatures that work on reinforcement, so if you reinforce their behaviour by giving them attention while they're barking, what they're going to do is continue barking and continue to crave that behaviour that you're giving them of attention. So if your dog starts barking, ignore them, and then when they stop barking, give them lots of attention. So positive reinforcement essentially. And equally, even if they're not barking, if they're sort of running away, cowering, anything like that, the most natural response in the world from a doggy parent is to want to comfort your pet. But unfortunately, when you comfort your pet when they're cowering and when they're upset, it reinforces the behaviour that, you know, when they're cowering and upset, for them to carry on doing that. So as harsh as it does sound, wait until your pet sort of calm down a little bit and then pay them attention. So Jenny's just asked a question as well. How can I stop my dog from barking at the door every time we get a trick or treater? Good question. So that one I think is very much down to training. So my dogs are sticklers for this. Every time we get someone at the door, whether it be a delivery person, whether it be, you know, the postman, anything like that, they love to bark. So I think the most important thing in that respect is to make sure that they're not too near the door when the people come round. So for example, when the trick-or-treaters are there, if you've got sort of a bigger house, you can keep them confined more in the upstairs or the back of the downstairs, with some doors in the way for either sound or stimulation purposes. Another good way is to trying to think, because it is a difficult thing, because noise stimulation with dogs, it's a difficult thing to wear out of them. So desensitization is actually a good thing as well. So with desensitization, you can get lots of sort of tapes and things online, and it's kind of like, it's like yoga videos and things like that, but for dogs. So it puts them with exercises, plays certain amounts of noise, and it desensitizes them to that noise. Yeah, so, and another thing, as I've said before, positive reinforcement is key. So when your dog is not barking at the door, so for example, if someone knocks at the door and your dog's a little bit calmer, praise them lots then. But if they get a trick-or-treater and they're really, really up against the door, make sure that you just push them aside, ignore them, and then carry on. Okay, so Ken's also asked a question: how can I make sure my bonfire is safe from wildlife before I light it? So, a really good question. It's very difficult because hedgehogs and badgers and foxes and things like that love to burrow. So I think the most important thing is don't make your bonfire too far in advance to let them get these burrowing spaces. I think also, apart from not doing it too far in advance, make sure that before you light it, you thoroughly check it as well. And make sure there's not anything that would encourage wildlife to go towards it. So lots of kind of damp leaves. So mimicking their natural environment is important to avoid. So hedgehogs like to burrow in damp leaves and things like that. So make sure that your bonfire is made out of some man-made materials, so a bit of newspaper and things like that in there, so they don't associate it with their natural burrows. Okay. So I thought we should talk a bit about supplements now. So there are many products out there that you can give your pets when they're feeling a little bit blue around the bonfire period. There's a range of products ranging from nutraceuticals and supplements, and then there are more prescription drugs which your vet can talk to you about more. Unfortunately, I can't talk about those products, but we will talk about the nutraceuticals as much as possible. So one product that I really love is a product called Nutricalm, and Nutricalm is essentially a product that contains the building blocks of hormones and neurotransmitters. So most people know about dopamine and serotonin, which are important building blocks in your brain, and they're very important for keeping dogs calm and things like that, as well as in humans. So with the serotonin and dopamine, they're really, really good in calming your dog. So Nutricalm contains the building blocks of those. Nutricalm also contains neurotransmitters, so those are chemicals in the brain that help difficult way to describe it, to help connections in your brain work properly. And it also contains an ingredient called passion flower, which helps it's kind of like a natural calming effect, a bit like milk flour and things like that. So yeah, Nutricalm is a really good product. You've also got other ones. Carmex is another one, very, very similar to Nutricalm. You've got Zycline, which is a product that contains a milk protein called casein, which is very good and has really good calming effects. You've also got other products called Ucalm, things like that. All of them are much of a muchness. They're all supplements, and they're all very, very good at their job. Some people find that they work really well, and some people find that they don't have so much of an effect on your animal. So if your animal is extremely nervous around the period, I would recommend to maybe go to your vets and discuss with them about some more prescription medication that you can try. Okay, right, so Jay has asked a question about, have you got any tips for stopping my dog from escaping, running away? So really good question, actually. So around bonfire night, it is really, really difficult to keep your dog from, if you take them out into the garden, for example, for a wee when the fireworks are going on, and stop them from running away, or if you're out doing a night walk and a firework suddenly goes off, them getting scared away. So what I'd say for that is make sure that you walk them well before the bonfire, the fireworks are due to start. So it gets dark around 5 o'clock now, let's say. So I'd recommend taking your dog for a walk either in the morning or the sort of early afternoon, rather than leaving it until after work when you know that it's going to be dark. And with a lot of kids finishing school at sort of 4 or 5 o'clock, you know, firework displays might start at that kind of time. We can't say that, you know, it's going to start at 8, 9 o'clock at night. So I definitely recommend taking them for a walk in the morning or in the in the early afternoon, to be able to wear any energy out of them, so they've been for all the wheeze and poos that they need to do, and make sure that they're not out during that time that would stimulate them. For stopping them escaping or running away, make sure when you take them out on a walk, if they is at night, to keep them on a lead, and put any reflective gear on them as well. So you can get harnesses with reflective gear, you can get collars with reflective light flashing collars, just so when they're in the dark, people are aware of their presence, and if they do run away, then there's a bit more of their presence out there for people to see them. So yeah, that's, I'd say that's really important. Exercising them before, like I said, if it gets to sort of 3 o'clock and you find that they're the sort of animal that is really hyperactive, then, like I said before about taking them out for a walk, it's not only so they've done all the wheeze and poos, but also just get a bit of energy out of them, so then hopefully when the fireworks come round, they're less sensitised as well. Okay. Brilliant. So Hannah has asked, are there any non-chemical measures to calm my dog on bonfire night? Brilliant. So we talked a little bit about the products, NutriCalm and things like that. There's also non-chemical measures as well in pheromones. So some of you might know about Fellaway and Adaptil. They're really good products and they work based on natural pheromones. So when dogs are born, the mother gives out pheromones essentially, which are chemicals. They're almost like smells, but you can't physically smell them. It's more of they're sensed by your brain, and it then goes on to have an effect on your body, much like smells would as well. So those pheromones are really, really good in calming your pets. Now, you can also get the products, for example, Fellaway. They do Fellaway Classic, which is just for calming down cats in general, and then Fellaway Friends. So Fellaway Friends is a product that if you have cats, and if you have 2 cats who don't get along very well, it's very good for sort of calming down the environment, getting rid of the hierarchy that might be in place causing a lot of problems, and rebuilding their relationship up just with those pheromones. So no, that's a really good idea. And as well as getting them in wall sprays and things like that, and much like the air fresheners that you get at home, you can also get them in collar form. So if you have a dog that's quite active and also gets very nervous when they're out, for example, again with the fireworks, if you do need to take them for a walk in the evening when there are fireworks going on, they can wear the Adaptil collar and almost take the pheromones with them to calm them down on the way. So, I'd recommend that as well. It's a really good one. There's also another really good product called a Thunder Shirt. So I don't know if anyone's heard of this. It's something that's went around in the media a bit recently. And what it is essentially, when you have a baby who's upset, swaddling them in cloth can help to calm them down. And it works via pressure points. So what you do is you wrap them in sort of a swaddling blanket, and it constricts them, and it calms them down. And it's something that we've used for years and years and years in babies to calm them down, but it's only something recently that's been utilised in pets. So dogs, for example, you can get this thing called the Thunder Jacket, which has exactly the same thing of providing a gentle constant pressure on their body and swaddling them to calm them down, much like you giving them a really big hug and continuing to sort of clutch them to you. And it really, really helps to calm them down. Nobody knows quite why it does, but it's been something that's been working for so long in babies, and now that we've introduced it in dogs, it's been a really, really popular product. So another way of calming them down as well. So yeah, no problem, Hannah. Brilliant. So, should we talk a little bit about neutering? Because I've had quite a few questions on here about neutering, and then we can go back to bonfire a little bit later if anyone has any other questions. So I'm just looking back. I think we had a question from Stacey. So she said, hi, when should I get my dog neutered, before or after their first season? So excellent question, Stacey, something that I'm asked a lot about. So it's very much between vets as to what they think, you know, before or after the first season. It used to be that vets believed after the first season was best to allow for the best growth rates and things like that. But now that more research has been done on breast cancer in dogs, mammary tumours, and things like that, it's actually recommended that you get your dog spayed before their first season. So I would personally, as a vet, recommend getting your dog spayed before their first season, and we'll talk about the health benefits of that in a second. But what I'd say is, if you have a larger breed dog, something like a Great Dane or a Affenpinscher or something like that, something that will grow very big, and after 6 months they do continue to grow, what I'd recommend is getting them spayed after their first season, because the influence of estrogen on their bone growth is really important beyond that 6 months, because they will continue to grow. So in those dogs, I'd say after their first season. Now, reasons for getting your dog spayed before their first season are mostly to do with the benefits of mammary cancers. So with mammary cancers in dogs, it's not quite like in humans where, you know, there's a 1 in 3 chance. If you are a dog and you're not spayed, by the sort of age of 6 or 7, there is a very, very high chance that you'll get a mammary tumour. So if you get your dog spayed before their first season, there is a relative chance of 0.05% of them getting a mammary tumour, and that's nothing. Now, after their first season, that jumps up to 8%. So even in that time before their first season and after their first season, there is a significantly bigger chance of them getting a mammary cancer, unfortunately. I mean, from then, it does jump up until after 3-year-old, there's not really so much of a protective effect again. So if your dog is over 3 years old, unfortunately, spaying them isn't really going to help with their effects of mammary cancer, but doing it earlier will, which is good. So that's to answer your question, Stacey. So, Sue has asked, she has a 4-month-old Labrador and she's considering getting her spayed, and what are the costs and benefits? So, we'll talk a little bit about the costs first of all, because that's something that everyone worries about, and that's the main reason that puts people off getting their animal spayed. So, getting them spayed is much like in humans when humans get a hysterectomy, except in animals what we tend to do is remove both the ovaries and the uterus as well. In humans it tends to just be the uterus. So by removing both the ovaries and the uterus, it takes away both the hormonal effect of the reproductive system from a dog and a cat, which is estrogen and progesterone. And it also takes away the uterine body, which is an organ that can very readily get infected. Now, it's more likely to get infected when under the influence of estrogen and progesterone from the ovaries, but there is still the chance of it becoming infected otherwise, which is why we do tend to remove both the ovaries and the uterus itself. Now, some vets just do remove the ovaries, which does have a really great effect, but a lot of vets have been trained to remove both the ovaries and the uterus, which is a procedure that a lot of vets feel very, very comfortable doing. And it's quite a simple procedure. It's something that vets perform daily, and it's something that the technique has been so refined that it's a very, very safe procedure to do as well. Now, other costs, obviously it's a general anaesthetic, so putting a dog under a general anaesthetic, there's always a slight chance of complications under a general anaesthetic, but the more and more technology has come on, the safer general anaesthetics are nowadays. So I'd say the relative risk is very, very small under a general anaesthetic if you have a nice healthy dog. Obviously, if they're a little bit less healthy, for example, if they do have a uterus infection, if they are an older dog who's unspayed and they developed uterus infection, and unfortunately with a lot of uterus infections, antibiotics and medical treatment doesn't work. So one of the only treatment options is to spay your dog when they have a uterus infection, and being that they're a slightly less well dog, it can be a more risky anaesthetic to have. So those sort of some of the costs. Other than that, other costs, you can get urinary incontinence as well. So urinary incontinence is a really big topic amongst vets at the moment, and the risks of getting urinary incontinence once a dog is spayed. So urinary incontinence is essentially a condition that develops because of the lack of estrogen from the ovaries. So estrogen tends to keep the urinary sphincter, which is at the base of the bladder, nice and tight. And if you have a dog that obviously doesn't have that estrogen influence, if they're spayed, the sphincter can become less tight and actually let urine leak through. Now, this tends to happen at rest. It tends to happen when their muscles are nice and relaxed and they're sleeping. So when dogs are spayed, there is an increased chance of them getting urinary incontinence, but there is also a chance of any dog really getting urinary incontinence. And there is a slightly more of a chance of a dog getting urinary incontinence if they are spayed compared to if they're not spayed, but it's not kind of a significantly larger percentage. So yeah, those are the costs. Now, we talked a bit about mammary cancers. So obviously the risk of getting mammary cancers is very high in unspayed dogs. So I really would recommend for that reason getting them spayed. Now, another reason I just mentioned as well is uterine infections. So uterus infections are nasty, nasty things. They can be quite life-threatening animals, especially if the infection isn't allowed to drain out of the uterus as well. So with uterus infections, there's two types. There's open or closed, which depends on whether the cervix is open or closed. So when the cervix is closed, it means pus can't drain out of the uterus, and what can happen is the uterus can actually burst, which can be fatal to the dog. If it drains out, then there is still a chance that, you know, that it could resolve, but it's better if you do get your dog spayed at that point, because it gets rid of the source of infection. And like I mentioned earlier, there is a chance that medical treatment might not work as well. So kind of costs and benefits of getting her spayed. I'd say 4 months is a little bit young, so maybe wait until 5 months or 6 months. But before her first season, I definitely recommend. Even though she's a slightly larger breed, I would probably say that a Labrador is one of those ones I would do before 6 months. Okay, it's also a much safer procedure before they've had their first season as well, because you can imagine during their first season, the vascular supply, so the blood vessels going to the uterus, it becomes a lot greater. So when you then spay them consequently later on, there's more risk of a bleed happening while they're being spayed. So yeah. So thank you, Sue, for your question. Just to have to look down the list. Paul's asked what age should I get my dog neutered. So I talked a bit about bitches, about female dogs. So let's talk a bit about male dogs. So with male dogs, there's a bit of a less of a controversy about when you should get them neutered, because they essentially don't have a season. So with male dogs and female dogs, I'd say with male dogs, getting them sort of castrated at about 5 or 6 months old is kind of the norm. Now, I'm not quite so pushy with castrating male dogs as I am with neutering female dogs, simply because a lot of the conditions that result as a consequence of not having your dog castrated can be resolved by castrating your dog. So, for example, testicular tumours, they don't tend to spread over the body. And castrating the dog does tend to just get rid of them. And then prostatic hyperplasia, which is a condition that many older men get as well, is quite common in older dogs who are unneutered. So if your dog does get prostatic hyperplasia, then it's a case of neutering them and their prostate will shrink. Now, unfortunately, if they can get other conditions with the prostate, such as cancers as well, which won't resolve by neutering. So it's kind of not a given that if your dog gets a problem, if they're a bit older and they're unneutered, it's to do with their testicles, that they will resolve if you just castrate them. Another thing you can get is a type of testicular tumour called a Sertoli cell tumour, which produces estrogen, and it can feminize the male dog. So, for example, they get mammary development, they start to lose a bit of hair on their coats, and it can actually make them quite unwell. It can suppress their blood cell production from their bone marrow. So it's not a given that if you don't castrate your male dog, then castrating them will cure anything that goes wrong with their reproductive system. So something to think about there as well. But like I said, with male dogs, you know, about 5 or 6 months old, I'd probably recommend getting done. And also, another really good reason for getting your male dog neutered at a young age is so they don't learn aggressive behaviours. So when your dog is a little bit younger, he has a lot of testosterone rubbing around their body, which I'm sure a lot of mums out there with male teenagers will say is, you know, something that they have to deal deal with every day. So testosterone can make dogs quite aggressive. Castrating them young can stop that testosterone influence from A, causing the aggression, and B, getting them done young, it can stop them from learning that behaviour and performing it without the testosterone influence. So if they're a little bit older and you get them castrated, it can be that they've learnt that behaviour already. So unfortunately, castrating them then won't stop them from developing that kind of behaviour. Now, I've talked a lot about dogs, but let's talk about cats. So castrating your male cat, I'd say any time between the ages of 4 and 6 months is perfect to do it. Now, I'd say castrating male cats is much more important than castrating male dogs. Now, if you have a male cat that's uncastrated in your neighbourhood and you have cats yourself, you'll probably know that male cats who are uncastrated can be very, very territorial, and can get in quite a lot of cat fights. They can stray very far as well, and they can get a lot of, other problems. So castrating your male cat is a very, very simple procedure for your vet to do. It's very, very quick, takes a couple of minutes, and it really stops that testosterone from causing all those problems in your cats as well. Now, spaying a female cat spaying a female cat is equally just as important, mostly for the reason that if you do have a female cat that becomes of reproductive age and she is entire, she will get pregnant. There isn't really two ways about it. If you let her outside, she will get pregnant. And then you've got to deal with a lot of kittens, which, although it sounds like a really, really cute idea, having a lot of kittens around the house, actually, in the grand scheme of things, it can be a lot of work, especially if you're not prepared for it as well. And there can be a lot of problems associated with pregnancy. Female cats can get mastitis, which is a mammary gland infection after they've given birth, and they can also get quite sick if the birth doesn't go as planned, if they need a cesarean section or anything like that. So although it sounds nice to let your cat have a litter of kittens, and equally with a female dog, letting them have a litter of puppies, first of all, actually they don't really know any different. So letting them have a litter of puppies probably isn't going to make a lot of difference to them. They won't know that, I can have puppies, I can have kittens. They don't have that sort of cognitive ability to be able to interpret that. So if you're doing it more for your dog's sake than anything else, or your cat's sake, I wouldn't say it's particularly important at all. And I'd say actually the health benefits of getting them done before their first season, before they've had any litters, are actually far outweigh any benefits that might be in place if they knew that they could have a litter of kittens or anything like that. Okay. Just have a look down the list. We haven't got any more questions for now, so I think we'll talk a little bit about fireworks again. So we've talked a little bit about what to do when we have, your dog that's upset by trick-or-treaters coming to the door and things like that. So I thought I'd talk about something that's really important in fireworks, is to make sure that your dog has a place to hide inside if there's fireworks going on outdoors, and equally with cats as well. So with a place to hide, a den essentially, shall we call it, dogs love a nice safe place to be able to escape to when they're scared, and equally cats do. So you can build a den in a nice quiet room of your house. You can maybe get a couple of blankets, a cardboard box, something like that. Make sure it's nice and open fronted so that they can go in and out of it as they please, so they don't feel trapped in it or trapped out of it. Make sure it's nice and cosy, make sure they've got some food in there, some water, and make sure it's somewhere that they feel safe as well. So for example, if you make it in one room of the house that you think might be really, perfect for them, and they actually go and hide in a different bit of the house, don't then try and force them to go in the bit of the house that you've made the den in, because they can feel that that place isn't safe, so they've actually gone in a different bit of the house to make themselves nice and safe. So, I'd recommend letting your pet almost decide for themselves where their safe place is in the house. Other things you can do when your animals are feeling a bit nervous around bonfire night is make sure that all the windows are closed, make sure that all their curtains are closed, make sure that the cat flap's locked, most importantly, because I think that's one thing that a lot of people forget to do, especially if you do normally have the cat flap open at night. If the cat's inside in its safe place, nice and calm, and the fireworks suddenly goes off and it spooks it, one place it might run straight towards is the outside, and if the cat flap's not locked, then unfortunately the cat's gone and when it's outside the house, especially with cats, it's very difficult to know until they come back whether they're safe or not. So locking the cat flat is something I'd really recommend. So we've got a couple more questions through. So let's have a little look. Jenny has asked, what should I do if my dog accidentally eats candy or treats he shouldn't have? So really good question, Jenny. Something that I think all pet owners worry about is their dog getting hold of something that they shouldn't. So if your dog accidentally eats any chocolate or candy treats or anything like that, what I'd recommend is to ring up your vets. Now, most vets have an emergency helpline, and if they don't, then they normally will direct you towards an emergency helpline that they're in contact with as well. And what the vets on there will be able to do is calculate the amount of either chocolate or sweets or whatever that your dog or cat has eaten, and tell you whether that's over the toxic level for that particular drug, shall we call it, because essentially that's what it is. So for example, in chocolate, the ingredient in that, theobromide, is the one that makes dogs and cats very unwell if they eat it. So if your dog eats some dark chocolate, for example, it's got a lot higher levels of theobromide in per sort of gram than milk chocolate or white chocolate does. So if your dog eats maybe 1 square of dark chocolate compared to, 5 squares of milk chocolate, it can actually have the same toxicity level. So I would recommend ringing your vet up to ask them, and what they'll probably recommend then to do is take the dog down. If they've eaten it really recently, they can often make the dog sick to bring it back up, or if not, they can give it an ingredient called activated charcoal, which is really good in helping to bind all those toxins so that they aren't absorbed by the body and then they're just passed through. Right, so that's Jenny's question answered, so thank you very much, Jenny. So Rachel has asked, how should I introduce my new kitten to my older cat? He's 12. So, good question. Another thing I've had a lot of recently, as well as this, I've also had how can I introduce my new kitten to the dogs in the household, or how can I introduce my new puppy to the cats in the household? So we'll go with the new kitten to an older cat. So I mentioned earlier about Fellaway. Fellaway Friends is a really good product. Comes in a little plug-in in the wall, and it produces pheromones that help to neutralize any feelings between cats that have kind of bad feelings between one another, through the pheromones that we talked about before. So that's one idea. Another one is proper introduction, I think, is important. So slow introduction. First of all, I'd probably recommend to do it behind a sort of a gate or something like that. So for example, baby gates or things are really perfect things. So popping the older cat one side and the young kitten the other side, and just letting them interact through the baby gate, so that if one feels uncomfortable, they can run away without the other one sort of chasing after it. So that's often a really good idea. Cats are often animals that like to sort out their hierarchy though, so you might get a little bit of a scuffle when they first get introduced to one another, usually with the older cat putting the younger kitten in his place almost, but it is an important thing for them to do, because once they've had that initial kind of meeting of minds, as we like to call it, they'll then establish their new hierarchy and be able to move on and then hopefully not have any more fights. So yeah, it's a difficult one, and it's one that does take a lot of patience, I think, with introducing new animals to one another. But yeah, definitely making sure that you give them a route to escape if when they introduce them they don't get along, so we're not kind of forcing them together. And also with pheromone treatment as well, so prepping the house a couple of days before you get the new kitten with the Fellaway friends, and then when the new kitten comes in, you've got that kind of in place for the older cat to be nice and relaxed with. So yeah, so thanks Rachel for your question. So Faye's asked a question as well. So she's asked, when is it safe to take an animal out of their den? So what I'd say to that one is let them decide. If they don't feel safe, they won't come out. And I think it is important not to remove them from their safe environment, especially during bonfire night. Fireworks can last from, like I said earlier, 5 o'clock in the evening when the kids come home from school, right up until midnight when, the adults are celebrating. So I'd recommend to let them be in their safe place for as long as they want during that night. Other than that, if it comes to the next morning and they're still in their safe place and they don't want to come out, as long as the fireworks have stopped, you can probably start to try and coax them out. But like I said, don't force them to come out, because they feel safe in that safe place, and you don't want that to then become a place that they don't associate with safety. If you start to force them out, they can then see that that's a place that you can get to, and you can manipulate as well. Whereas if you leave them to come out on their own accord, they'll think, okay, well, that is a place that I can then go and I can sit and I'm not going to be interfered with, so feel a lot more safe about it. Okay. So another thing we can talk about with Bonfire as well is showing your animals when fireworks go off that you're sort of unaffected by them. So animals very much feed off of human behaviour, so if you're scared of something, your dog's most likely going to be scared of it as well. And equally, if you show a really brave, wholehearted front to it, your dog will then think, okay, well, it's not actually that bad. So for example, a firework goes off and you jump or you get scared, your dog will then feed off of that and exhibit the same kind of behaviour. But if when a firework goes off, even if you're a bit startled by it afterwards, sort of laugh at your dog, play with them, make sure that they know that you're not affected by it. And hopefully that will then show them that it is a safe thing, because it is just the noise that dogs tend to be upset by. It isn't really the flashing lights or anything like that. So yeah, something, and again, we talked about desensitization earlier as well, so sensitizing them to the noises of fireworks in a CD, kind of like a CD with yoga on it or something like that, or whale noises, you know, that kind of thing. It's a very similar concept. You can get them online. They're actually really good. There's been a lot of positive reviews about them online. Not something I personally tried, but I think with fireworks coming up and with a lot of people being quite reluctant to start their dogs on drugs and nutraceuticals, I think desensitization, as well as the thunder jacket that I mentioned earlier, I think they're really, really good ways of keeping your animals calm around this period of time. And also with the thunder jacket, that is something that you can give them sort of on the night. It's something you don't have to kind of prep them before, because some of the nutraceuticals, for example, Zycline, one of the nutraceuticals I spoke about earlier, you actually have to give it a few days before the event first starts. So if you give it to your animal the day before, it might not have the desired effects when the time comes around. But with something like a thunder jacket, you can just pop it on your dog as soon as the fireworks start, or a couple of hours before, and it'll have the immediate effect almost that some of the other products won't. So actually, that's another really good point. If you're not so prepared, try one of the products that doesn't need a couple of days of preparation. Desensitization might take quite a while for an animal to get used to the sounds and things like that. So if you don't start it until a couple of hours before, it's unfortunately not going to have a lot of effect. Yeah, so that's another thing to talk about. So another good thing you can do on bonfire night is put on some background noise. So put on the radio, the TV on quiet, just so it's not silent and then you get this sudden burst of fireworks that dogs are upset by. You kind of have that background level of white noise almost, I think, for animals. I think a lot of animals do like the radio. You know, a station like Classic or something like that is actually really calming for them. So I think that would be a really good idea, putting on some background noise. Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of sort of animal dedicated radio shows or things like that. But I think, you know, there are some being developed, especially with TV channels. So something to watch out for the future as well. Brilliant. So I don't think we've got any more questions for the second. But we can talk a little bit more about neutering as well. Oh, here we go. Charles just said, my neighbour used to play Mozart in the background when there was fireworks. Yeah, brilliant idea. Something that you can, you know, like on classical FM, anything like that kind of thing, I think is really, really good. It's also really good for the kids as well, if they get a bit scared by them as well. Getting that background noise in often really helps. Okay. So, yeah, let's talk a little bit more about neutering. So some people say, why should I get my dog neutered if they're sort of 8 or 9 years old? Is there really much point? And we've spoken a little bit about the benefits of getting them done when they're young. The benefits of getting them done when they're old, even though you don't get the benefits of mammary tumours being reduced because they're a little bit older. Rather than spending thousands of pounds getting your dog neutered when they have a uterus infection, you could just get it done when they're completely healthy. when it is at a much reduced rate. So what vets do is we like to underprice our neutering procedures to encourage people to get them done. So the cost of the surgery might actually be more than what we're pricing it at, because we do want to encourage people to get their dogs done and their cats done when they're younger. So getting them done at 6 months of age, when they're nice and young and healthy, you might pay, I don't know, £150 to get your dog spayed. Or you might have to spend £1,500 when they're 7 or 8 if they have a uterus infection, because unfortunately it is a much more complicated surgery when the animals are unwell. It's more of a risky general anaesthetic as well, and there's more chance of things going wrong because the uterus is obviously quite engorged with infection and with blood as well, given that they do tend to happen around the time of their season, just afterwards in fact. So yeah, important point for getting them done when they're a little bit older as well, just to reduce against those risks of mammary infections and against uterus infections, sorry. And then with things like male dogs, with the prostate cancers, prostate tumours and things like that, and with anything like testicular tumours, they all do tend to occur when the animal is a bit older as well. So even getting them done when they're a little bit older actually has a lot of protective effect when they're male dogs. So we haven't talked about cats much today. So I don't know, does anyone have any questions about cats at all? About, you know, any problems at all? So Lucy has asked, "Hi Anna, my friend's dog Milo is becoming aggressive. Would he calm down if he was neutered?" So really good question actually, Lucy. So we talked a little bit earlier about aggression in male dogs. So aggression is a funny thing. I mean, how old is your friend's dog, if you wouldn't mind me asking, if you just reply. If he's a young dog and he's getting a bit aggressive, so sort of about 6 months, then if he was neutered, I think it probably would have quite a lot of an effect on keeping him calm down. If he's sort of a little bit older, maybe 3 or 4, that behaviour, as I described earlier, might be a little bit more inbuilt. So it might be a learnt behaviour rather than behaviour influenced by hormones. So it might be a case that he is already exhibiting that behaviour, not because of the testosterone floating around his body, but actually because he's learnt that if he exhibits that behaviour, he gets a reaction out of other dogs. So yeah, Milo's 2 now, so yeah, now he's 2, it might be that it's a little bit late to get him neutered for the effects of the aggression. Not to say that it wouldn't work. I mean, I think it's a very individual dog thing, so some dogs will calm down a lot if you neuter them when they're a little bit older. Some dogs won't. But it is a really good place to start with trying to control their aggression. But I think also with aggression, it is important to go over behavioural therapies as well. So positive reinforcement is something that I'd say is, you know, really works with dogs. They don't tend to learn by negative reinforcement, which is when you punish them for doing something bad. What they tend to learn by is rewarding them for doing something good. So, for example, if you've got Milo at home and another dog comes in and, you know, he's a bit aggressive towards them, don't pay him attention. Because what he'll learn from that is that you're giving him attention when he does something and does the aggressive behaviour. So he'll want that attention. So essentially that's positive, well, it's kind of positive reinforcement for him. But it's more, you know, that he is then going to exhibit that behaviour because he thinks he's getting a favourable response out of you. So if you say to Milo, "No, stop it, don't do that," and sort of bring him away and say, "No, naughty dog," rather than him actually taking that as a negative response and getting upset with that, actually he'll think, "Oh, I've got a reaction out of my mum then, that's really good, I'm going to continue to do that." So next time he'll look to that behaviour when he then gets aggressive with another dog. Whereas if you ignore him when he's being aggressive and then afterwards you praise him when he's calmed down, he'll think, "Oh, I didn't like not getting that attention when I was being aggressive. I actually liked it much more when I was nice and calm, and I got that nice reinforcement." So I'd recommend with Milo, more so than looking towards the neutering side of thing. I mean, like I said, it is a really good first place to start, but I think positive reinforcement therapy is a really good way to start. Brilliant. So I hope that's answered your question, Lucy. So just have a look, we got anything else? Here we go. How do you feel about dressing up pets for Halloween, Anna? So something I get asked a fair bit at work, actually. Now, it's a very personal opinion, I think, about whether dressing up pets is a good thing. Some people absolutely love it, and some animals, fair enough, absolutely love it. I had a client came in the other day who told me how much their dog absolutely gets so excited when you get her little outfits out, little bows and things out, and how she prances around the house with them on, and is really, really happy with them. And you know what, that's completely fair enough, and I'll support, you know, a dog being happy any stage of the day. If you put a costume on your animal and they sit there very subdued, ears back, not really liking it, if you put little shoes on them and they start to, you know, pick up their feet like they don't know what's going on, signs of distress. And I'd probably say in that respect, if your pet doesn't enjoy it, don't force it. I mean, I remember I once put a pair of antlers on one of my little dogs and she sat there as if it was the worst thing in the world, and I felt so awful, I took them off immediately, and I haven't done that again. So I think some dogs just aren't used to it. If you obviously do it from an early age, you know, then some dogs will get used to it. But starting when they're a little bit older, and also if they've been living a lifestyle where clothes isn't part of it. I mean, some dogs, younger dogs, smaller dogs, chihuahuas and things like that, when they go out on walks, they might need coats because they get quite cold. So if they're used to having little outfits like that, they're going to be more susceptible to having little, you know, tiaras and things put on them and fairy wings and things, and then for Halloween, you know, maybe a little scary ghost costume or something, and they probably won't care so much. But if you have a big Labrador who's, you know, got a nice coat on him and he's not used to wearing coats, he's not used to wearing anything dress up, and then you go and stick a Dracula cape on him or something, he's probably going to wonder what's going on, why am I being punished like this? And yeah, he probably will get quite subdued. So yeah, that's kind of my standpoint on it, Kevin. I'm open to it if animals enjoy it and if it's something that, you know, people have done with them since they were young, so it doesn't bother them. But I think humanising animals as well, I don't think it's probably the right way to go. Animals are their own creatures, and I don't think that they should be humanised. You know, they're amazing creatures, but I don't think it's fair, you know, to put that kind of pressure on them and try and humanise them by giving them clothes. So yeah, that's kind of my standpoint on it. A lot of vets have different opinions. Some will say that no, there's never a right situation to dress up your pet. But actually a lot of pets, like I say, are used to having coats and things on, so, you know, having a little jumper on for Christmas probably won't faze them too much, but with other dogs it probably will. So yeah, that's my standpoint on that, Kevin. So thanks for your question. So Sue, do you suggest my dog wears a coat now the weather's getting colder? So what type of dogs do you have, Sue? Let me know, and I'll just talk a bit generally about this. So if you have a dog that has a very thick coat, then if it's a nice waterproof coat, so it's not kind of a very downy, fluffy coat, I'd say that no, you wouldn't need to wear a coat now the weather's getting cold. If you have a dog that's either got a really thin coat, so something like a greyhound, a whippet, anything like that, or you have a dog that you clip, so something like a spaniel, a cockapoo, a poodle, anything like that. Oh, so it's a Labrador, brilliant. Okay, so we'll talk about Labradors in just a second. So yeah, a cockapoo or anything like that gets clipped. What I'd recommend is if you clip them, then to give them a coat, just to supplement what they're used to with their coat on. You know, with their natural coat on. If you give them a nice jacket on top of that, then, you know, if they have their coat originally, they're going to get hot. But if they're used to having that coat and then you clip it off and you take them out in cold weather, then I would recommend putting a coat on them just to, again, supplement their coat that's gone now. So with a Labrador, I wouldn't say with a Labrador it's particularly important. If they're particularly thin, then it might be a good idea. But Labradors tend to be these sorts of animals that have quite good fat coverings normally. They tend to be quite greedy dogs, bless them. So they like to eat and tend to be, you know, have a good fat layer on them. But, you know, if he has particularly thin fur, if he has any conditions at all that causes thin fur, if he's particularly thin and just in himself, or if it's a young Labrador, even if it's, you know, a puppy Labrador, in the colder weather, smaller animals lose heat much more easily than bigger animals. So, you know, if you do have a smaller dog as a puppy, they might need to wear coats when they're a little bit younger, but as they get a bit older, they get a bit bigger, their coat develops, then they probably won't need to have a coat on. So, yeah. that's kind of what I'd say about wearing a coat now that the weather's a bit colder. With rain, I'd say that if you're going out for long periods in the rain with your dog, then a little raincoat probably isn't a bad idea. Some dogs' fur is quite naturally waterproof, but some dogs have, like I was mentioned earlier, quite fluffy downy coats, so it absorbs the water, can actually make them quite cold. So I'd recommend, if you are taking them out for quite a long period of time in the rain, to put a little raincoat on them. And you can get quite nice light ones from pet shops, online, anything like that. Just make sure you measure your dog's chest size before you do it. Because sometimes you can get coats that are too small or too big, and they'll either then slip off and not really have much effect, or they'll be too small and constrict them while they're trying to walk. So important to get the right sizes. So Jay has asked, I see lots of pugs in coats, but I've always not done it as ours is fawn, which I think means she has 2 coats, therefore I doubt she needs one. So yeah, good question actually. Within breeds, they can also have different coats as well. So some pugs, some other breeds, collies, huskies, things like that, they can have double coats, which means that they have a nice waterproof outer coat of long hair, and then on the inside they have a nice fluffy sort of almost insulating jacket on the inside. So what I'd say, if yours is fawn and she has 2 coats, you'll be able to tell if your pet has 2 coats if you sort of push it in the other direction to the way you'd normally stroke your dog. What you'll see is on the top layer there'll be lots of nice long thick hairs, and then underneath there'll be a nice downy layer. If they just have one type of fur coat, then it means they just have 1 coat. If they have 2 different types of hair, it means they have 2 coats. So having 2 coats, yeah, I'd say that they probably don't need a coat. But if like I said about the rain, the outer coat does tend to be quite waterproof, but if you do find that they get quite cold and wet in long periods of time, I probably would recommend a little thin coat in the rain. So yeah, that's what I'd recommend with that one, Jay. And no problem, Sue, at all. So yeah, talking about pugs, quite a fashionable dog to have at the moment. If you are considering getting a pug, I think do your research on them before you do. They can get quite a lot of problems with their eyes and with their breathing. And I think if you do take one on, make sure that you get it from a really good breeder. So someone who's experienced in dealing with pugs, and someone who has bred pugs to a good standard, so they have minimal sort of eye and breathing problems and things like that. And what I'd also recommend is to get them insured as well. So we do insurance here at Everypaw, lots of different companies that do insurance, but yeah, make sure that you do get them insured, because a lot of things can go wrong, and they can be quite expensive conditions as well. So with regard to that, I'd probably say that, you know, having a good insurance policy is crucial in case something does go wrong. And it's the same with any pet, really. If you do have a pet, make sure that you do have an insurance policy for them, just to make sure that there is a backup if something goes wrong, because you can have the healthiest pet in the world and then one day it can trip over and break its leg, and, you know, to fix a broken leg can cost, you know, up to £2,000, depending if you go to a specialist referral centre, and even more than that in some places. So even the healthiest of dog can have accidents and things can go wrong, and it is important to make sure that you do have a bit of insurance in places. It's called insurance, to make sure that you've got some backup there with them. So yeah, my standpoint on that. So has anyone got any more questions they wanted to ask at all? I think we've had some really good ones today, and we've had a really good discussion about bonfire night, and I think it's, you know, it's really topical at the moment, given that it's Halloween tonight, so happy Halloween everyone. And also it's coming up to the 5th of November as well, so Guy Fawkes night. So yeah, I think we had a really good discussion on that. With neutering, I think we've had a really good discussion on neutering as well. If anyone has any more questions, then feel free to leave any more comments, and I can get back to them into the next video. But yeah, I'd say that neutering is something that I'm particularly passionate about, and I'd say that, you know, make sure that you do thorough research on it before you either dismiss it or you go for breeding your pets, because not only with breeding your pets there's a lot of work, there are so many rescue centres out there with young animals in them, and not only young animals but also older animals that need adopting. So I'd say that the world doesn't really need many more puppies. but they need people who can offer homes to sort of younger dogs, older dogs, big dogs, small dogs, any dogs that are in a rehoming centre. So yeah, with neutering, I think it's really important. And we've also talked about dressing your dog up for the weather. So I think that's quite topical at the moment as well, with the cold weather coming up. Especially, it's gone really cold recently, really frosty mornings. So make sure that if you're taking your dog on early morning walks, that you respect the weather, because it can be quite cold for them even if it's not for you. The bottoms of their paws can be quite sensitive, so not only in the summer months we talk about the pavement being really hot and making sure that it's not going to burn your dog's paws when they tread on it. Also in the winter, frost and ice and everything can make your dog's paws really cold as well. So it's equally important to make sure in the early mornings that you're not walking them somewhere that's going to freeze their paws and make them get what's called ice burn on their paws as well, which is not a very nice thing for them to get. Equally, if your dog's not going to tolerate little shoes as well, I wouldn't recommend taking them out in the morning. But if you've got a little dog that loves dressing up, like we talked about earlier, get some little shoes for them. I'm sure they'd absolutely love it. But yeah, make sure that they're nice and wrapped up for the warm weather, especially it's going to get a little, for the cold weather even, it's going to get quite snowy as the months go on. Hopefully, we haven't seen some snow in a while. So yeah, make sure your pets are all nice and wrapped up. But yeah, it's it's been almost an hour now, so I think we're going to leave it there for today. But I've really enjoyed talking to you all. Our next live chat will be in about a month's time, and we'll come up with some topics for talking about them. I hope you have a good month and enjoy Halloween and enjoy Bonfire Night, and your pets are nice and safe. So thank you, bye!